It should be self-evident that the only way to rescue the Canadian and world economies is a massive injection of government-created money to permit governments to operate their economies at full capacity without recourse to borrowed debt money. There is also the only way to eliminate the volatility of the old system and the private bankers' power to create both booms and busts. Well, fortunately for Canadians, we have already a ready-made solution for that. And it can be implemented immediately. And of all the ideas on the table today, and there are quite a few of them in different parts of the world, I think that the one that we're proposing is the best balanced and most comprehensive. I guess maybe I'm a little bit biased, but I have looked at them all that I know of, and I am convinced that the one we're proposing is the best of the lot. It is also, in principle, a solution that can be subsequently applied on a global basis. It was first presented to Finance Minister James Flaherty on March 21st, 2013 by 20 very concerned Canadians. You have two of them here with you tonight, Jerry Ackerman and myself. It's called A Social Contract Between the Government and People of Canada. And the preamble reads as follows. In view of the fact that our present banking and financial system is unstable, unsustainable, and basically immoral, we, the undersigned, on behalf of all Canadians, demand that the federal government use its constitutional power over all matters pertaining to money and banking by forthwith taking the following actions to benefit all Canadians. Number one, the Government of Canada should print 15 non-transferable, non-convertible, non-redeemable 10 billion nominal value Canada share certificates. Second, simultaneously, the Justice Department should be asked for a legal opinion as to whether the share certificates qualify as collateral under the Bank Act. If not, legislation should be introduced to amend the Act to specify their eligibility. Number three, the government should then present the share certificates to the Bank of Canada that would forthwith book the certificates as assets against the liability of the money it created. That's the way the system works. The Bank of Canada has to balance its books. So just like other banks, it would use the share certificates as collateral, and that be assets on the one side, and the money that it created for the country and the people would be the liabilities. But this is just a technicality, and that's the reason that we have taken this way of going about it. The federal government should immediately the certificates would be deposited, and the Bank of Canada would create $150 billion and deposit it in the government's bank accounts. The federal government should immediately transfer $75 billion to the various provinces and territories in amounts proportionate to their population, with the understanding that they would help the municipalities as appropriate. So there would be no need at the present time, for example, to cut back on essential services or to sell valuable assets, such as Hydro One, etc. Amend the Bank Act, number 4, to reverse the 1991 amendments that eliminated the requirement for the Canadian chartered banks to maintain cash reserve against their deposits, and provide the Minister of Finance or someone acting on his or her behalf the power to set the level of cash reserves for banks and other deposit-taking institutions up to a maximum of 34%, beginning in fiscal year 2016-17, and provided in that 16-17 the amount is not less than 5% until the new 34% base has been established in 7 years. This will ensure that there will be no inflation resulting from the government-created money. Number 5, repeat the action prescribed in sections 1 and 3 for 6 additional years until the bank cash reserves reach 34%. 6, in each fiscal year following 2022-23, which is at the end of the 7-year period, the amount of government-created money spent into circulation will be 34% of the desired increase in monetary expansion for that year, with the remaining 66% to be the prerogative of the chartered banks. Well, the great advantage of changing the system over 7 years is to allow all levels of government the certainty of a cash flow adequate to complete projects once they have been begun. We have all seen projects that were started, stop, wasting money, redrafting, starting again. And this would allow us to start projects, huge projects, and to carry them right through to completion during the 7-year period. And also to facilitate a smooth transition for the banking industry to its new, stable, and sustainable system. 7, the amount of the government-created money created during the transitional period should exceed prudent budgetary requirements in some cases. In other words, the government would actually have more money than it needed for its current affairs. And so governments at all levels should take advantage of the opportunity to pay off significant amounts of their outstanding debt. It is estimated that the federal government could reduce its net debt by as much as 1/3 during the period of 7 years. And that would provide further relief to hard-pressed taxpayers. Well, just a little background of the reasoning behind some of these things. Transferring 50% of the government-created money to the provinces and territories on a per capita basis with no strings attached will produce near miraculous results. It will help resolve the centuries-old problem of federal-provincial relations and give the provinces greater freedom to manage their own affairs. Infrastructure projects can be launched without federal approval, except in rare cases where the outlay is so large that federal help would still be required. What a difference that would make. That you wouldn't have to get 3 different governments to agree on everything, taking sometimes months or years to get through the red tape before you can get a shovel in the ground. And it happens all the time. But this would allow governments, including the provincial governments and money that they would turn over to the municipalities, to go ahead and get on with the job, get things done. You've probably read about the proposed squeeze on transfers for health care that is likely to come as a result of the budget. Well, if this money was transferred to the provinces, it would not be a problem any longer. But the greatest advantage is promoting economic growth and job creation. And that would be 300 or 400% acceleration, with 14 governments making the decisions rather than just one. Then on the idea of using share certificates instead of bonds to conform, this is just a technical thing. It would not be any longer expedient to use bonds as we did in World War II, because at that time we had practically no debt. So if the government issued some bonds, I mean, who cared, especially in wartime? Today we have more than $600 billion debt to start. And what we're proposing here is the government creation of just a little over $1 trillion in 7 years. And if you had to book that all as debt, which you would if you used bonds, because even if there were zero interest-bearing bonds, you'd still have to book the nominal value of the bonds, which would be $1 trillion, and add it to your existing debt. And you'd have a nominal debt of $1.7 trillion or $650 million, which is ridiculous, you know, because all of that would be owned by us, and there's just no point in having such a grotesque presentation. So by using share certificates, starting a clean slate, doing it right, so that 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, you still haven't got this huge mountain of debt, and a lot of it's been paid off, and certainly none has been added during those years. So it's a technical thing, but in my opinion, a very important one. Thomas Edison, the inventor of the incandescent lamp, said when discussing the question of government-created money, quote, "Any government whose credit is good enough to create a bond can create a bill." And I would say any government whose credit is good enough to create a bond can create a share certificate, because it's just out of one hand and into the other. The division of the money creation function between governments, 34%, and banks, 66%, as opposed to the current 97% for the banks, is a carefully reasoned estimate of what each requires to do its job. 34%, in my opinion, would be enough that our governments could do just about everything that we would reasonably expect them to do at reasonable tax rates and still balancing their budgets at every level. So no further deficits. And I think 34% would allow that to be the case. In fact, I'm almost sure enough I'd bet a nickel on it. And then the 66% for the banks. That is really a ratio of 2 to 1. So they would be right back where they were when the Bank of England was first chartered. And that would give them enough credit creating room, space, to finance small business, individuals, a little temporary help for larger industries, but not enough for any of the other things they do, like financing hedge funds, huge takeovers, and derivatives that they're playing games with and have turned the whole financial system worldwide into one giant casino. So they would no longer be able to do that. And we wouldn't have to worry about waking up in the morning and seeing that the whole system had come crashing down around us overnight while we slept. Remember, it's the people who own the license to create money. We own it. It's part of our heritage. It is our sovereign right. And in Canada, the Constitution makes it very, very clear that the Parliament of Canada can do whatever it likes in this arena. So we haven't suggested anything that isn't beyond the capacity of Parliament and the government of the day to make happen. Banks are just licensees, and they enjoy a unique privilege of creating what we call money. We should never have allowed them to call bank deposits money, but they pulled that one over the politicians' eyes too. But we'll still allow them just enough leeway under their licenses to do their job and be more like a public utility and to serve us rather than us as debt slaves serving them, which is the present case and has been